Airsoft guns, we can rebuild them. We have the skills. We can make them stronger, faster, and better than they were before.
Hi, welcome back to Tech Tips. I'm Jeremy with Airsoft Extreme, and today we're going to be talking about how to shim a version 2 gearbox. So for this difficulty rating, I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10 gears, simply because putting the gearbox back together can be really difficult, trying to get the main spring back into position. And but I will show you how to do that. So, tools I'm going to be using for this is going to be a Phillips screwdriver. This particular gearbox is a version 2 Javelin blowback gearbox. Sometimes they require different headsets or different screws on here, which would be a T10 Torx, but most of the time they're going to be a Phillips. I also use a punch for the spring guide, which will help me position it back into place, and also to take it out of the gearbox. I can I'll show you all that when I'm about to do it. Now remember, if you do any kind of modifications or upgrades yourself, you will void your warranty. Unless you're really sure and know what you're doing and everything, I would bring it to an Airsoft Extreme technician. All right, so now we're going to take this sucker apart. This is where it can get a little tricky, and this is where the punch is going to be handy. So what you're going to do, there's a hole in the back right here. You're going to want to get your punch, you're going to want to put it in there and do whatever's comfortable. I usually use my left hand. That's the way you actually want to do it. So what you want to do is when you are about to pop this open, you want to hold the cylinder down, because if you don't, everything's just going to fly apart. So what I usually do is I put my finger on it, and I use these two fingers right here to kind of grab the mech box and just pry it up. So what you're going to do is you're going to get your punch, you're just going to slowly start to lift it. And as you can see, you're holding down the cylinder. If I was to let this go, this thing is just going to pop open. And then just release the tension on the back, and there you are. So there's 3 different types, or 3 different thicknesses of shims. There's a 0.1 of a millimeter thickness. There's a 0.2. Can't really see that. And then a 0.3. And these are your basic shims on how to shim a gearbox. So what you want to do, or how we do it, is usually you start, then there's the 3 different gears. I should have talked about that. This is the spur gear, sector gear, hence there's a section. It's kind of easy to remember that way. And then there's the bevel gear. It's bevel. And this is basically the one that's going to touch or grab the motor. I'm sorry, the pinning gear on the motor. So you usually start with this gear, or you do start with this gear, the sector gear, and you're going to use the 0.2. You don't want to use the 0.1 because it'll basically kind of scrape at the bottom or on the gearbox. So you want it to just sit just high enough to where it's going to run smooth. You're going to put that at the bottom, like so. Insert that in. Another little trick you can do is if you're having trouble having it stay on there and it just keeps falling off, you can get a little bit of grease, silicone grease, and you can just put a little dab on there and it'll hold it in place. That guy's going to go there, kind of test to see. Runs pretty smooth. And then so next you're going to get the sector gear, and this is where you're going to get the 0.3. You want to use a 0.3 because you want this gear to sit just above this gear. Because if you don't, it's going to rub, you're going to cause resistance and grinding. It's just going to not sound very good. And there you are. And then what I usually do is I'll close the gearbox from here. Stick your hand or your finger where the cylinder would have been or is, and you kind of test it to see how smoothly it runs. It's pretty smooth. So what you want to do from there is you can actually, what I usually do is I'll turn it upside down and I'll get like a punch or pretty much anything and just kind of test to see the play. You want to leave basically the base ones at the bottom, or the 0.2, the 0.3, you want to leave those ones at the bottom, and you don't want to shim anymore. You basically, what you want to do is put on top. And I'm sorry I didn't get to this gear, but you want to get your bevel gear. You also want to use a 0.2. Put that there. And also test to see how smoothly it runs. That's pretty good. So basically from there you just want to stack on top. So you leave those gears in and you just start shimming on the top. Test the play. Put it together. Not too bad. One thing you want to do, and it's kind of important, is that once you think you got it to the point where these gears are not really moving anymore, they're in there, you want them a little loose, but not super loose. You want them in there kind of snug, but you want this to move pretty smoothly. One thing you can do before you start putting it back together is put a couple screws in it, so that way it simulates it all together when you actually put the gearbox together, because sometimes what will happen is it'll pinch down, and what you think might be shimmed, it'll actually pinch down and it'll get tight again, so then that way you're going to have to adjust. So once you got that shimmed, take these screws back out. You want to do this slowly, because sometimes, yep, see, the gear or the shims are sticking. So you want to put those back. Where they go. And then you want to put the mech box back together. All right, so this is pretty much the hardest part about doing the gearbox, basically. Taking it apart, yeah, it can be pretty easy, whatnot, but it's once you try to get it back together, that can be a little tricky. But there are a couple little tricks you can do. All right, so you get your gears, they're in there. So usually I'll start with the cylinder, spring, whatnot. And there's a little post right here. There's also a hole, so it basically holds this in place real nice. Okay, you want it to be like so. You want this post part just kind of be right about there. Spring back in. Okay, once you get this back together, you want to get the tappet plate spring. The Javelin uses one that's a little bit different from like a classic Army or Marui or anything like that. Basically, it's hooked on, whereas this one sits in here like this. The easy way to do it, actually, is what I use is a razor blade. I know it can be kind of dangerous, whatnot. You can also use like a small jeweler screwdriver, but I find that just a razor blade just works out pretty good because you can get in between the grooves. And one thing I forgot to tell you guys is that when shimming, a razor blade actually works really good, because when you try to shim these gears, say you have, you close up the gearbox, you put the screws in, one of the shims or one of the gears is too tight. Well, this is going to be easy. Instead of trying to take out the gear, shake, try to get this thing out, you get the razor blade, you can just pop that shim right off. Kind of a little trick. So anyways, oh yeah, that plate spring. You put that sucker back. Another little trick I kind of learned as of recently is that sometimes the tappet plate will pop off, it keep popping this shim off right here. And I fought with it many times and I get it closed and all of a sudden the shim pops out of the gearbox, and that is frustrating. So what I do is I actually put the tappet plate on top to make it easier to put it back together, and I'll show you what happens when you put it back together. But yeah, this can be a real pain in the butt if it's underneath. You try to close it up. As soon as you close it up and put tension on it, it just pops the shim right off. So basically you're going to put that on top. Next thing you're going to do is get the end reverse latch. Now this can also be a pain because it does want to tend to pop off, but I have a little trick you guys can do. So you take your bevel gear out. You want to make sure this is the post on this is pretty close to the tappet plate. It doesn't have to be exactly on or anything like that. So you get the end reverse latch. Put that on there like so. What I use is a jeweler's or something of the sort. Just kind of pull this back because it does have a spring right here. Now some end reverse latch springs are a little bit different. They use a different type of spring, but it's basically the same same setup. So you hold that back, put that in, and then there you go. A little trick I do is actually use a magnet, a real powerful magnet. I think they're called earth magnets. And I usually will put that at the bottom so the anti-reverse latch doesn't pop out, because as soon as you start putting tension, things start kind of binding up, and then this thing will want to pop out, and it can be a pain in the butt. And this also is something I just kind of learned recently, is to put that at the bottom so it just holds it in place. Pretty easy. So this is the hardest part. So what you want to do is get that punch, you want to put it in the spring guide. Same kind of thing when you open it. Put this on top. Same kind of thing when you open it. You want to hold it the same way. You want to put your fingers right here, and you want your index finger or whatever is comfortable for you to hold down the cylinder, because as soon as you push down on this spring, it's going to want to pop this up. So from there, what I usually do is I'll line it up, kind of clamshell it, like so. Grab from the sides, put your index finger on the cylinder, kind of hold this part down right here. And then basically you want to push this in. Now remember, spring guides have grooves, or I'm sorry, like posts that sit inside these like little grooves right here. So you got to make sure you line those up correctly. Just basically clamshell it like so. And then what you want to do is you want to push the spring guide in, and you want the bottom post, or one of these posts, to actually get inside of the groove. And once you kind of push, and also when you push, I find it easier to kind of, you're dipping it in, not just pushing straight in. If you push it straight in, the spring wants to like kind of bind up and whatnot. So what I usually do is I kind of come up at an angle and I push down. Just kind of, you're scooping it in. Put that in place. And then close. Usually 9 times out of 10 it's not going to line up right with the gears and whatnot. So that's where the razor blade and the small jeweler screwdriver will help. Now remember, I put that tappet plate on top of the that shim so the tappet plate can hold it, and all you got to do is just push this in, let it go, and it lines up. So that's basically how you do a shim job. It takes a little practice, but you know, with practice, you know, you can get good at it and whatnot. But remember, if you're uncomfortable with it and everything, just bring it to Airsoft Extreme, and we can take care of you. You guys have a good night, and I'll talk to you later.